Hey, it's Dave here, living the next chapter. I have a guest with me today. Super amazing. Fred Rutman is with me. Fred goes by repeatedly Dead Fred, and there's a great reason for this. Fred has died 20 times, and he has a new book coming out March 9th called The Summer I Died 20 Times. He's had 11 heart procedures. All kinds of things have happened to him. And he is here to share a story about living life after dying 20 times. So this should be a very interesting conversation. And it was. And I'm glad to share it with you here on Living the Next Chapter. Here's a little excerpt from the podcast. This is Fred. Hope you stick around for the entire thing. And we've got great show notes today. Lots of great things that Fred brings up as resources. Here you go. Fred Rutman, repeatedly dead Fred, here on Living the Next Chapter.
People are the blessings in my life, to be honest. I mean, nobody can go through an adventure like this alone. And, of course, you know, my immediate family are my biggest supporters. But a lot of it were people who were essentially strangers to me, and just found out I needed help, you know, through my synagogue or whoever, former business acquaintances. And, you know, I had people, like streams of people visiting me in the hospital. Once I was in ICU, and the nurses told me I had like 60 people visit me that day. And they'd never seen anything like it. You know, and you're not usually allowed more than 2 people at a time. So that was a continuous stream. It's also exhausting as a patient. You know, you appreciate it, but it's exhausting. And people have just become my biggest supporters and support system. People I barely knew. And, you know, I think Malcolm Gladwell has a premise that as an adult you become, or you exhibit the behaviors and mannerisms of the 5 or 7 or 10 people you spend the most time with. And I have to say it's true. And I've been fortunate these people have, you know, embraced me. And they're just spectacularly generous people.
Okay, welcome to the podcast. I have a guest with me today that is extremely unique, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. He goes by repeatedly dead Fred, and there's a story behind this, several stories, but my guest today is an author, and he has a life journey that's going to astound you, and I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to the podcast. Nice to see you, Fred. How are things?
Things are great, Dave. Thank you for having me on.
It's exciting. So, okay, we gotta address this right off the bat, Fred. Where does repeatedly dead Fred come from? It's a unique tag. I haven't heard a lot of people use this before. Can you kind of give us just a brief overview? We'll get into more detail, but why repeatedly dead Fred?
It's a nickname that was given to me by my friend Deanna. And it's because I've been repeatedly dead a few dozen times. I've been clinically dead. Heart stopped breathing, and that's where it came from. It's a name out of love, but it also makes for a good tagline.
It's a great opening story, I guess, in any kind of social function or everything. Oh, if you met my friend Fred, he's repeatedly dead Fred. Here he is. That's quite unique. Okay, so I have lots of questions, Fred, for you.
Okay.
So is there times when this has happened for you, and it's happened many times for you? What are you feeling in the moment? What's happening with you? Are you aware of what's going on? Can you give me some kind of insight to this? Because Hollywood makes it seem one way. Everyone kind of has their own ideas, but I'm talking to you, and you are the one with the most experience in this. what is going on physically for you? Maybe you can give me an example of something that's happened in the past and some of the situations around that.
Well, I think the first 16 or 17 times that this happened to me, the doctors hadn't diagnosed me yet. So I didn't know I was actually dead all those times until they said, holy crap, you're dead.
Wow.
And the dying part is actually the easy part. The coming back to life part is the really painful, torturous part of it. I know a lot of people report that they've had the come to the light or, seeing relatives and stuff like that. I didn't really have any of that, and I feel kind of ripped off. If it happens once and you don't get it, okay, fine. When this happens, in the 30s and 40s and it hasn't happened, it's a little annoying. I have had a bunch of the out-of-body experiences, and, you're looking down on yourself wherever you are, out in a field, wherever you happen to have died. And it's also really uncomfortable and confusing, and depending on, your take, if you have a soul that's leaving your body, if you're religious of any sort, that's, your soul is in a state of confusion. It doesn't know it's supposed to go up, it's supposed to go down, it's supposed to go back in your body. It really has no direction. And that's really, I'll say uncomfortable because I don't really have a better word to describe it, but it was really uncomfortable.
So do you have any kind of background with growing up in a faith or a belief system or anything like that kind of gives you some kind of point of reference at all? Or
well, I'm Jewish, so I lean more towards the Orthodox side of Judaism. Okay. So I've got that belief system, and even in that belief system, there's no unified theory of heaven and hell and stuff like that. It depends which rabbi you talk to. So definitely believe in God. I definitely believe in some sort of afterlife, but I don't think it's the afterlife that we see in like those old Philadelphia cream cheese commercials where the woman's on the clouds, the wings, and everything tastes great and you get bagels all you want and stuff like that.
Oh, so, man, I was really looking forward to the bagels.
Well, maybe that's your afterlife. Maybe it's just not mine, because I know I could cut down on the carbs. So,
okay. Oh wow! So is there anything that stood out to you where you're just like it's a memory for you that you can't shake? It's there all the time for you. That very vivid situation that had happened in the past.
Oh, all the memories are there. Yeah. Like I can remember almost every experience.
Okay.
But the most vivid is the coming back to life, because if you go by the Bible story, I mean, God creates the universe with words.
Yeah.
And energy. That's like, let there be light. That's the ultimate energy that we have. So basically, we're even in our human form, we're just a bunch of chemical reactions and energy.
Yep.
So I've sort of gravitated to that our soul is just, a chemical reaction and energy, and doing its thing. It keeps us alive, and then it leaves the body and goes somewhere else to keep something else alive, whatever form that takes.
So your medical history, Fred, what kind of things have you been dealing with? I know you mentioned to me about the pacemaker and everything. Tell me a little bit about your medical history that kind of led up to some of these things happening to you.
Okay. it mostly started in the summer of 2009, and I started what they thought was passing out randomly.
Okay.
And every time I would pass out, I would hit my head, and which led to concussions because I was like falling onto a curb or a manhole cover, or, all sorts of very uncomfortable things. And they eventually figured out that I have a condition called a severe heart block. And what that means is the electrical system in my heart started dying. So you have these things called nodes that disperse signals that tell your ventricle and atria to beat. And those signals stopped happening. And so my heart would stop, and then your blood pressure goes to zero, and you have no oxygen going to your brain, and you stop breathing, and you're clinically dead. And I guess the definition of clinically dead that I was given is your heart's not beating and you're not breathing for 30 seconds or longer. Wow. So that's what was happening to me. And we had one recorded in the hospital that I think it was almost 5 minutes.
Wow.
That's a pretty long time to have no heartbeat and no breathing.
Are there any long-term effects for you, Fred, in all this? Like having this happen so many times? Does it take
I'm
a
a
toll
mess
on your body? Yeah. Oh,
yeah, there's a lot of PTSD and post-concussion syndrome. And if you keep up in sports at all, concussions for the athletes are a really big deal. And, they're studying the long-term effects of repeated concussions. So I've always got that anxiety in the background that I'm going to end up with, what do they call it? I think it's called CTE. Don't ask me what CTE stands for. That these athletes go totally off the rail as they get older and do horrible things. But I'm working on things to counteract that, to make my brain healthier and to recover and things like that. So I lost depth perception and balance and memory. So I mentioned before that I'm Jewish, and we pray 3 times a day generally. And you try and do it in Hebrew. And my friends brought me my prayer book to the hospital, and I've been reading Hebrew since I was about 5 years old, and I went to read my prayers. I no longer knew how to read Hebrew. It knocked an entire language out of my head. Wow. So there's all sorts of crazy things that went along with that. So, even going up and down stairs. Yeah, going up isn't so bad. Going down the stairs, I often lose my balance. So I imagine most subway systems are the same way. You go up and down stairs, even sometimes escalators. I have difficulty timing when to step on to the escalators. But the subway platforms can be a nightmare. So they're generally sloped towards the track for drainage. And it's not much of a slope, but sometimes I can be on the platform and I'll feel like I'm about to fall off the edge of a cliff and, just get this sort of tsunami of anxiety. And I'll literally have to crawl on my knees back away from the platform to, sit against a wall or something till that goes away. So sometimes your brain just loses the capacity to manage your emotions. And it just, overestimates the situation you're in. So things like that.
So that's like a defense thing then? Your body's trying to help protect you?
It thinks it is, but it's overprotecting because there's no real danger there. I'm not going to fall into the subway tunnel, but it just miscalculates. So it doesn't happen as frequently as it used to, but it still happens.
Yeah. So, and just to get everybody up to date, you were mentioning before we hit record that you have some more surgeries coming up and stuff. What's happening up for you coming up soon?
Well, the thing that keeps me alive right now is I have a pacemaker, which replaces the electrical system in your heart. So it's a little supercomputer, maybe the size of a pocket watch, if anybody knows what a pocket watch is anymore.
Yeah.
And so they run on batteries. But unfortunately, like our phones, you can't get wireless charging for these things. And when they go, they go. And because one of my pacemakers is malfunctioning, it drains the battery prematurely. And I've got about 6 or 8 weeks left of battery power. And if you've ever driven your car and it says empty, you're like, is it really empty or do I push this?
Oh,
you know?
boy.
So they think it's 6 or 8 weeks. So they're trying to get me in ASAP to replace that pacemaker. They give you an entirely new unit. So they don't just replace the battery because the tech on these things upgrades so ridiculously fast. So a pacemaker from 6 years ago is essentially obsolete now.
I'm just trying to imagine, Fred, your doctor coming into the room with his clipboard and your charts, and he walks into the room. My charts are probably like 1 page. You probably have a binder for all of the things, and your doctor's like, oh, Fred, nice to see you again. Here we go. Let's go through your history. Like, there's a lot here to talk about. And that's kind of why you're writing a book then, right?
Yeah, the book initially started as like a little bit of a journaling exercise to help me get through everything, because there's really nobody that's been through my situation. People have their other struggles for sure. And there was no real roadmap for figuring out how I was supposed to recover. So journaling was one of the tools that my therapist gave me. And then somebody suggested I enter a short story competition. And so I started writing for that. And it got way too long for a short story. Yeah. So I eventually just kept writing and writing and writing. And then I had a few more of these incidents where the pacemakers failed and I had to have more surgeries. And so it's been a long journey. And like any other project, you get times when you're motivated and times when you're not, and you get stuck and you get unstuck. And such is the life of an author. And one of the things that really helped me was a book, Bird by Bird, by Anne Lamott.
Okay.
She's won a number of awards. She's a very eclectic writer. Her father was a famous author as well. And she teaches workshops on how to write. And she's quirky. I don't know how I came across her book. Maybe somebody gave it to me when I was in one of my hospital adventures. But I read it. And one of the things she writes about is everybody wants to be a published author. But most people forget about the part of being an author. Like, you can't get to the published part until you actually write something. Yeah. And that really resonated with me at the time that I read it. And I've got to keep writing. Otherwise, none of this is going to come to fruition. And, whatever system you use for writing, whether you're going to set yourself a word count or a time count, you've got to write 15 minutes every day or whatever. I guess over the pandemic, I decided I was going to write 1,000 words a day. And if it took me 20 minutes or it took me 3 hours, that's what I was going to do. But that also includes editing. So I might have taken away 300 words and, added how many other. So that's just the system I got. I was fortunate that we had great weather. I would just sit out on the deck. We back out onto a park, and it was a really pleasant environment to do writing. But, everybody has to find their own environment and their own why for why they're going to write.
Yeah. What a journey. Like, I always say, I talk to these authors all the time, Fred, and I love that everyone has their own story. Everyone has their own journey. And, and no one can tell your story better than you can, because, I can't even imagine what you've gone through in your life, but the power of your words and the things you've learned and the things that you know, and a lived experience like this, it's so unique. Like I'm excited to see this book come out. What are you hoping for your readers that pick up this book? What are you hoping that they take away from this when they read it?
I'm hoping that somebody who's gone through their own trials and tribulations might pick it up and find out that, there can be a silver lining, maybe not, a perfect silver lining, but there are ways that we're finding every day that people can overcome their medical challenges. It's not going to be a straight line, but there are resources out there, and there's more natural resources out there than we ever imagined even 15 or 20 years ago. Things like neuroplasticity and brain reactivation and intermittent fasting to heal your body as well as give you some weight loss. Every day they're finding out something new about intermittent fasting, which is probably the thing that's helped me the most from a physical recovery standpoint. It's just amazing. So one of my doctors who introduced me to intermittent fasting said, it is the most powerful non-medicinal medical tool that they have in their bag, and almost nobody knows about it.
So how does the fasting help you then? Like, what are some practical ways that it shows up and it helps you with your health?
Well, the fasting can activate a whole bunch of subsystems in your body. So firstly, it helps you get your hormones rebalanced, because many of us, especially those who eat the standard Western diets and super ultra processed foods, our bodies are just out of whack. We don't understand when we're hungry, when we're satisfied, anything like that. And all those are hormonally driven systems. So if you can get your insulin balanced and your blood sugars balanced, all those other hormones come into play, and you just operate better, no matter how healthy you are or aren't. Then it activates a system called autophagy, and I forget the scientist's name. He's a Japanese doctor who just won the Nobel Prize for his work in autophagy. And autophagy is a cellular system that's running 24/7, and it repurposes all the broken down or folded proteins in your body. And most people say, we have broken down and folded proteins? What are those things? Yeah. Well, it's basically like getting your cells plugged up, just like our pipes get plugged up in our homes. And it makes our cells sluggish. It prevents them from producing energy efficiently and all sorts of other things. The way we see it mostly externally is you'll start seeing scars on your body heal up, because your scars are basically collagen or proteins. And once you're healed, they don't really have a purpose. So the autophagy process starts essentially eating and repurposing those proteins. I look at all the scars I have from my surgeries, and to me, they're essentially 60% gone.
Wow.
Women in the intermittent fasting groups I was involved with report that their cesarean scars have almost disappeared.
Really?
Yeah, varicose veins. It's amazing. And people say, yeah, it's anecdotal, but you can't really do this type of research as a study. But when you've got hundreds of thousands of people reporting this, I think there's more to it than saying, "Oh,
Yeah.
it's just hearsay."
Yeah.
So, when you're in the fasted state, you start producing more growth hormone again, which is really important for women, especially because it helps fight off the osteoporosis that unfortunately many women fall victim to, and helps with their bone density. I had a bone density test about 18 months ago, and my numbers are off the charts. It's just, actually, the doctor said he's never seen higher numbers, but which doesn't help on the scale, but it helps when you fall over.
Well, it's amazing. One thing I heard somebody's talking about, like fasting, was they mentioned it like a reset button for your body, where you just kind of like you just go back to the way it should be. You're not eating healthy, you're not living healthy. It's like a reset, just to reset your system. I'm like, that's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah, it resets so many processes. Apparently, your body really prefers to run on ketones as opposed to glucose. And your brain is much happier. So a lot of people report that any mental fog that they've had is essentially lifted. So they can think more clearly. It helps with neuroplasticity. It helps rewire your neural system if you've had injuries. Creates new synapses and new neurons. Dr. Mark Mattson, who was, I think, the head of research at Johns Hopkins for this, just put out a book on this. He's been intermittent fasting since the 1980s, and he does a lot of research in how it helps your neural system regenerate. Jen Stevens, who's sort of my intermittent fasting mentor, not sort of, she is, has a book out, Fast, Feast, Repeat, and it talks about all the intricacies of ways you can tweak intermittent fasting, because what works for me might not work for you. So you might need a slightly different fasting protocol. And that's a fantastic resource for people.
Good. Yeah, we'll put all these links in the show notes because everybody needs to go and check these books out. That's great. Fred, like, who do you have in your corner that's been living this journey with you and supporting you? Friends and family, they might listen to this podcast episode and listen to your story again, but who are those people and what do they mean to you as you go through all this?
The people are the blessings in my life, to be honest. I mean, nobody can go through an adventure like this alone. And, of course, my immediate family are my biggest supporters. But a lot of it were people who were essentially strangers to me and just found out I needed help, through my synagogue or whoever, former business acquaintances. And, I had people, like streams of people visiting me in the hospital. Once I was in ICU and the nurses told me I had like 60 people visit me that day. And they'd never seen anything like it. It's, and you're not usually allowed more than 2 people at a time. Yeah. So that was a continuous stream. It's also exhausting as a patient.
Oh, yeah.
You appreciate it, but it's exhausting. And people have just become my biggest supporters and support system. People I barely knew. And, I think Malcolm Gladwell has a premise that as an adult you become, or you exhibit the behaviors and mannerisms of the 5 or 7 or 10 people you spend the most time with.
Yep.
And I have to say it's true. And I've been fortunate these people have, embraced me. And they're just spectacularly generous people. Financially, emotionally, whatever you need. And because of them, I'm a much better person than I was 10 or 15 years ago by a wide margin. by just a wide, wide margin. And it's a blessing to have those people in my life. Why they decided to come into my life, I have no idea. But I'm glad they did.
With all the things you've been through, Fred, would you go back and wipe it all away if you could and live a quote, quote, normal existence and not have all these health problems and concerns? Would you prefer that? Or do you think you're different today living through these things?
I think I have to take where I am.
Okay.
Your feet always take you where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be working on getting this message out to people who may not have the same supports I had, and to people who may not realize that they can be supports to other people. And it doesn't take a lot of effort on their part to reach out occasionally, to make a phone call, to take someone out for coffee, or to bring a sandwich over for them, to just give them that little bump. But it works on both sides. People need the help, and people need to help, because when you help people, you grow yourself.
With all the things you've been through, you spent your fair share of time in a hospital setting as well. Like, I'm sure that there are doctors and nurses and people that have been there for you in that environment. Any thoughts to them as well?
Well, I don't want to come across as condemning the medical system, because any system has its ups and downs, and I think most people understand our medical system is stressed and not operating at its peak capabilities. So I've had the full gamut of staff you've wondered why they've been hired and why they haven't been fired already, to true superstars at the other end. And you spend the most time with nurses, and they really are the unsung heroes of this whole adventure. And just, it takes a special breed of person to become a nurse, because they certainly don't get the glory or the pay.
And they have the knowledge, and they have the responsibility. They have all of the things without, I guess, the title of doctor, but they do basically everything. And like you said, they're not recognized the way they should be fully, I think, too.
Yeah. I mean, if I saw a doctor, I think at last count I was in the hospital 22 times for this adventure. And, if you saw a doctor 5 minutes a day, that was a lot. And, I was at the pacemaker clinic the other week, and I asked my doctor, how many patients do you think you have? And, he's not one of these doctors that's been in the business for 45 years. He's a relatively young guy. And he says, I have no idea. I said, like 500? He's like, 500? Probably more like 5,000, 10,000.
Oh my gosh.
And,
what?
That's a lot of 3-5 minute conversations.
Yeah. Wow. That is.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact number. When I had my stents put in, I asked the doctor how many procedures he had done. I think he said 20,000. So that's, 20,000 of 20-minute procedures. That's crazy.
That's a big number. My gosh. So Fred, so many people, Fred, are afraid of the word death. They're afraid of dying. There are people who think they'll never die. They're in their 20s and they'll live forever. Do you have any fear right now in your heart, in your life, of what might happen in the future? Or are you kind of at peace with this, being that you've done this so many times so far.
Well, I think it's inevitable for all of us. We just don't get to choose when.
Yeah.
I think if there is a God, the traditional way that we're taught that we'll be judged, heaven or hell, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to heaven, however you define it. Just a big part of that is faith. And why would you believe in a system where your only outcome is going to be hell?
Yeah. I'm sure, Fred, from your perspective, you're going to have a few questions for whoever you meet at that day, at that point in time. And you're going to have a few questions like, hey, why 20 plus times have I been to the edge? I'm sure you're going to ask some questions. I know I would. I'd want to know.
Yeah. Well, there's all those jokes about how people come to the pearly gates and they're greeted by St. Peter and they have all these, different interactions and things like that. So, from that perspective, it would be an interesting conversation, probably worthy of a podcast if it ever happens.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you might have to start your own podcast. Yeah. That'd be awesome. Fred, you have such
From
a
the
great
pearly gates with St. Peter.
There you go. I love it. Yeah, that'd be perfect. They get great ratings for that, I think. Fred, there's people listening to this too, maybe that have maybe a loved one that's going through some pretty tough times right now in the hospital, or they've just lost somebody that meant something special to them. Do you have any special words for somebody who's a caregiver or has lost somebody most recently? From your perspective, again, you have a very unique outlook on all of this. And I think your words would mean a lot to somebody who is maybe struggling right now. What would you like to say to them?
I have been touched by the words of Dr. Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. He was also a psychologist, psychiatrist. And I don't think what I've gone through is anywhere close to what so many people went through in the Holocaust or anything like that. But to sort of paraphrase and sum up his mindset, if you have hope, you can overcome almost anything. And I'm not saying it's easy to have hope and that it's, not going to come and go, but your mindset is everything. And it's not something we're taught in the school system. But there's so many things we aren't taught. We aren't taught great communication skills and, how to manage our money properly and stuff like that. Yeah. And we certainly aren't taught how important mindset and attitude is. And the more you can work on that, the better off you're going to be in almost every situation. And when I was coaching intermittent fasting, I would tell people to feed their brains as much as they feed their bellies. You have to get good nutrition into your body to make you healthy, but you also have to get good nutrition into your brain to keep you on the right path. And so however you do it, meditations, affirmations, faith, just reading all the self-help stuff you can, being around other positive people, it's probably the most important thing you can do.
Yeah. It sounds like you have those people in your life, it's great that you have that support system there for you. And, even if they joke about calling you repeatedly dead Fred, there's a lot of love in their words and a lot of love for you. And you can tell that these people really care a lot about you. So, So Fred, the name of the book again is coming out, you said, in March. Is that right?
In March, yes.
March
9th.
What's the name of the book again?
It's The Summer I Died 20 Times.
We're just going to keep that number at 20. We're going to just leave it there for a while. I think that'd be a good idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully.
So there's going to be in the book, are you going to kind of go into some more in depth to what happened and a little bit more about the stories behind these 20 things? Yeah. Okay.
And, I talk about people that I encounter along the way, both in the medical system and outside the medical system. People I met in the hospital, the doctors, the nurses, faith and some challenges to my faith. Because, as you alluded to before, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
What did I do to deserve this?
Yeah.
So some humor. I'm a little bit sarcastic sometimes,
Nice.
just sometimes. And some of my humor is dark.
Yeah.
Because you just have to make yourself laugh sometimes. So I try and throw in some humor. Some people might not get the jokes. Some people do. And I think it's a pretty balanced outlook of what I went through.
Again, Fred, planning for this conversation today and the chance to get to speak with you. There's so many things that are going through my mind. I could talk to you all day, I think. But I really do appreciate you making time for us. I'm looking forward to the book coming out. What is the best way for people to find you? Maybe there's somebody that has a question for you. Somebody wants to talk to you further. They want to get the book in March. Where do you live online that people can find you?
Mostly I live online in my fairly new Instagram.
Okay.
So they can just look up Repeatedly Dead Fred.
Okay.
That's my Instagram.
Okay.
Or if they want to email me, they can email me at repeatedly.dead.fred@gmail.com. And that will find me.
Okay. And then when the book comes out in March, there'll be a chance maybe to have you back and maybe talk about the book now that it's out. And are you going to have it on like Amazon and all that? Is that what your plan is?
Yeah, the publisher is handling most of those details, but it'll be available in paperback and ebook. If the pre-sales, hint, are strong, it'll also become an audiobook.
Nice.
And and there'll be, distribution to, Chapters and Barnes and Noble and things like that. And if I'm up to it, hopefully there'll be a book tour, which I think would be a lot of fun because, getting to meet the people is a lot of fun.
I love it, Fred. It's a great conversation. Again, I have more questions than we have time for, but I'm just so happy that I get a chance to talk to you and wishing you well for your upcoming surgery. I'm cheering for you. And again, I'd love to have you come back maybe when the book is out, and then we can help promote it a little bit more and get more people to buy this book.
That would be fantastic. Much appreciated.
Awesome. So
I'm actually looking into seeing if we can film the surgery.
Really? Well, that'd be interesting.
So it would be, especially if it doesn't go well. That'd be even extra more interesting. So.
Wow. Well, that's not going to happen. We're going to have a really good, everything's going to be successful. And again, if the doctors are doing what they do that many times, I'm sure you're in great hands. And I'm really, really happy that you found some people to support you and come around you. It's great to have you on, Fred. Really enjoy talking to you.
Me too. Thank you. I very much appreciate it.
Awesome, everyone. Please go when the book comes out in March, on March 9th, go and buy the book. You're going to have to buy the book and send Fred a message through his email. We'll have all his contact stuff in the show notes, but just send a message out to Fred and encourage him. And let's just keep this guy in our thoughts as he goes through this next upcoming surgery. Really appreciate having you on, Fred.
Thank you.
Thank you for being part of our podcast.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Well, the podcast is over. Thank you for being a part of this episode. If this is your very first episode, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. You can go back in our catalog. You can see some of the past episodes. But if you want to get a sneak peek of what's coming, You want to jump the line? Yeah, I got something for you. Go to our YouTube channel. Again, links are in the show notes and on our website, livingthenextchapter.com, and you can go to our YouTube channel and get the most recent episode way before everybody else. So we're putting this at the end of the podcast because we don't want to tell everyone. We don't want to have a stampede, But we're having some great conversations over on our YouTube channel. You're invited. You've been you're this far. You're the one listening. You are invited to our YouTube channel. Go over there and you can see the most up-to-date episodes in real time. Meet you over there. Thanks for listening. Cheers.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.